Hey, man, I'm super excited, Pross, for this conversation today, man. Generative AI in finance is here,
Yeah,
right?
it is.
The rise of the robots, right?
That's
We're
right.
here right now talking about AI.
And we're living it.
And we're living it.
Yeah.
We're living and breathing it every day. Pross, super excited about this conversation. Really, really excited to have you. Generative AI in terms of the application and impact it has for finance, for FP&A,
Absolutely,
across the board is here, man. So I really want to jump into the first question because I know this is the meat of what we want to talk about. I want to get your insights. What do you think the impact that generative AI is having around finance teams right now?
Honestly, Chris, it's going to do so much. I mean, when we think about it, it's not just generative AI, which is about looking at your language models and like really looking at your data and predicting what's next, generating text, generating images and reports and things like that. But it's natural language query, predictive analytics, machine learning, all of that which is available to finance. And think of all the crazy things that we in FP&A used to do that we don't have to worry about anymore, like variance analysis, anomaly detection, getting insights into large amounts of data. Like the world is our oyster in terms of the value that we're going to provide.
Awesome, man. And when I think of generative AI, we were talking a little bit about this backstage and offline, right? When I look at AI in terms of finance, right, people think generative AI is general artificial intelligence, right? To me, the real core application that finance is going to have with it is generating actionable information, right?
Absolutely.
And that's a Gen AI, because when you think about it, you use these tools, all the hosts of the generative AI tools, you're gathering information to draw some sort of action with it, right? Whether that's looking at a bottoms-up forecast, right? Or you're looking at more competitive landscape inside your industry, right? This is going to allow finance team to have more of that actionable information, right? Which is what you talked about. It's going to level us up, right?
For sure.
So when you look at one of those key benefits, if you were to break down a couple key benefits that finance teams can gather from generative AI, what are your thoughts on that?
So I think the first part is that we call the profession financial planning and analysis or planning and analysis, but we spend so much time planning. I mean, nobody likes to do planning, but we want the nirvana state as analysis. That's a number one piece where we're going to get all this information, these insights, and we're going to actually be able to use our MBAs or CPAs or our degrees, our brain power, our all the stuff we've grown up on in terms of understanding language and models and data, and really deliver insights to our business constituents. So I think that's the first benefit. Beyond that, it's going to be things like, as a finance individual, I was, my core job was variance analysis and being able to actually deliver true real-time variance analysis on the fly, but not on a scheduled basis, but on a real-time basis where I, as FP&A, can be proactive. I can go out there and warn my business constituents in terms of threats, but also let them know about opportunities and things that are available to us. So I think there's so much that we can do with AI that's going to make our lives a lot more easier.
Yeah, man. I love how you broke that down, Proz, and I want to dive deep into that because you talked about. I look at that FP&A, and that sounds so traditional, right?
Yeah.
When you think of the traditional FP&A of the financial planning and analysis, right? That sounds very quantitative. That sounds like ChatGPT or any generative tool can go do that, right? I think the level up and kind of what you talked about is moving FP&A to be that financial partner and advisor in the business, right? Because that's what generative AI can't do. I don't know about you, but I've used these tools. They can't sit across from a CEO or chief revenue officer and explain something, right? So it helps us value up that level to not just be, like you said, in the details.
Right.
I don't know about you, Pross, but I've been in finance for 20 years, and I never had a CEO, business owner, or founder sit across from me and say, Chris, you did a really great analysis, right? We got to have that advising, that analysis piece, and that time to not spend so much time churning and burning through this data, but getting it to a point to have actionable insights,
Yeah, and what I love most about it, especially with generative AI, think about the amount of time we in finance, we spend on reports, PowerPoints, building decks, I mean, crossing T's, dotting I's. Yeah, and it's hurting me to think about that.
Stressing me out, Pross, talking about that.
But with generative AI, we can look at a pool of data, like data that's we know, we trust, we know is clean, because that's the first part of using AI. You can't have AI working on garbage data. Your data has to be absolutely clean. And once you know when that data is clean and you trust it, and it's billions and billions of records from many different areas, using a business data fabric, which we can talk about later as well. Once we've got information, all that information at our fingertips, now it's putting generative AI or just AI on top of that and giving us those insights. And once we have those insights, imagine being able to just generate reports just by saying, hey, I want reports based on these traditional reports we have. It's all done for us in a perfectly easy manner. And get back to the fact that us as finance, we're delivering insights and we're taking action on this, and our business constituents are going to love us for that.
Exactly, right? We're going to lose that traditional mindset in the business. And I don't know about you, but a lot of times when I sit across, chief revenue officers, chief marketing officers, the C-suite outside the finance organization, it kind of gets back down to that traditional value that we brought, right? They were like, hey, finance is great in getting us the numbers, right? And yeah, that was a very valuable place that we provided business. But now the offices of the CEO, of the chief marketing officer, these other business partners that we help support, that's table stakes.
Yeah, absolutely.
That's table stakes. They're like, I expect finance to do that. But where we can level up is take that same scorekeeping, that same insight that we can provide and draw action, right? Yeah. And I want to get your thoughts on the office of the CFO, specifically around generative AI, because it's changing that, right? When I think about the CFO of the future, right, that CFO is that chief future officer, right? They're having to think about the future. We're looking at the different markets we want to go into, the different plans we want to provide, cost containment we want to do. So when you specifically talk about the office of the CFO, how do you think generative AI is changing that office?
So that office is going to have to become a lot more proactive in terms of learning about data. So CFO 2.0 or 2025 or 2026 is going to have to be a lot more data focused and data driven. They're going to have to know the data, they have to understand the data, trust it, and be the gatekeepers of that data as well, because if they trust the data, everybody else is going to trust them. So I think that's the first thing. Obviously, there's other areas, like they're probably going to have to be a little more geared towards statistics, so understanding regression analysis and other quantitative methodologies. That's not rocket science. That's something that anybody can pick up easily, right? And we've got all that in our back pocket from our accounting days and our math days in university or whatnot. So that's available as well. Finally, beyond that, I think it's about being a communicator as well, because once you have these insights, it's not just about having data, but how are you going to deliver that data? How are you going to guide that information? It's not just presenting it, it's communicating it, it's talking about it, and helping drive decisions internally that impact your customers externally as well. So everybody wins. So I think it's those three factors that are really going to be necessary for CFO 2.0.
Yeah, and Praz, I want to dive deeper because you brought up a really great skill set that's now expected for finance, FP&A, and CFOs of the future. You talked about communication, right? I don't know about you, Praz. I'm just going to be honest, right? I never learned in the CPA exam how to be a great communicator, right? I didn't take it in business school, right? There wasn't like communication 101 or business partner 101, right? Like this is a whole nother level of skill that you need to develop. So my next segue is really diving into that. What are some of those like core skill sets? You talked about communication, and I 1000% agree that that's a big one. What are some of those other skill sets that finance, FP&A professionals need to start developing now that are going to be, with generative AI? Like, what are those extra skill sets that are going to open up new opportunities for finance and FP&A professionals?
So it's going to be more than just reporting. I think the key thing is that now that you have this data, you really have to understand your business, understand your customers, and really understand the opportunities out there. Opportunities to grow your revenues, but also opportunities in terms of how to contain your costs and things of that nature. So again, it's not just about the reporting side, but it's about being strategic as well. So I think finance individuals have to learn how to be a lot more strategic and effective in terms of how they look at that data. It's no longer going to be about just presenting information. It's going to be about presenting and giving guidance and recommendations based on that, and being able to convey that in a manner that helps drive the organization in a positive manner or in the right manner as well. So they've got to become influencers. So how do you do that? To be an influencer, you've really got to expand your wings and really talk to everybody in the business. I mean, we know that everybody trusts finance, and with all this information, there's going to be a lot more of a spotlight on finance as well. So with that spotlight, it's time for finance to shine. And how do they do it? By taking this information and running with it as well, and building that confidence, externally and internally.
Praz, man, you got me so excited about this, man, because everything that you're talking about, right, is that leveling up. We got to bring that strategic partner, right? All the thought leadership and all the things that I do, I sit across from so many finance professionals across the world, accountants, finance, FP&A. You ask them, one of the major points you talked about was, tell me about your business.
Yeah.
How many finance people can sit there and say, I know about the business, I know our customers, I know how we sell, I know how strategically, I know what our competitive advantage are. Most of the time when you work with finance, right, and when other finance business partners are working with finance, they're like, man, I do the reporting and forecasting, right? I do the month-end close, right? That level of understanding the business, I think, and I agree with you 100%, is a key differentiator between a great FP&A professional and a good one, right?
Absolutely. Because, I mean, and also when I think about it, so many customers are still working on Excel models in terms of FP&A, and that's very limited in terms of your spreadsheet. And we know all the dangers, and spreadsheets are great. It has its time and place, but there's also dangers in using spreadsheets as well.
Facts.
The other piece of it is that there's planning tools out there. But the problem with a lot of planning tools are they're limited to 8 to 12 dimensions: your accounts, your time, your customers, your different hierarchies. And people only think of their business in terms of that constrained structure. You've got to break out of that mold now. You've got to understand that all this data exists there. How do you marry it with your 8 to 12 dimensions that you work with this vast swath of information, and bring it together to bring in better insights? So I think that's going to be a challenge, but best run class organizations and best run FP&A individuals are going to be able to overcome that, and that's really going to drive the CFO of the future.
Oh, yeah. Bring in, think about, finance used to just be about the debits and credits.
Yeah.
We used to just be about
That's
that,
it,
right?
yeah.
We used to just say, hey, we got cash and debit, right?
Yeah.
But now, I love that point that you mentioned is we got to know things out. We got to know qualitative aspects in the business, right? I think one of the biggest metrics that are driving that CFOs need to be a part of, employee NPS and engagement, right?
Yeah.
The human perspective, which I want to ask this topic, and it's a little crazy, right? A lot of times when you think of generative AI, a lot of finance professionals get this question of, is it going to take my job, right? And for me, I don't think that generative AI is necessarily, will it replace some things? Yes. But it's ultimately meant to level us up. It's meant to put us in exactly what you talk about, the strategic conversation, being better communicators, being better collaborators, bringing clarity to the business, right? So what are your thoughts on that when you think about the value proposition of what generative AI brings as far as tactical and strategic level roles in FP&A?
So I don't think it's going to take away our jobs. In fact, I think it's going to create a lot more opportunity for finance because there's a lot more information out there. And as we've been talking about, to access that information, look at that information, consume that information, and make decisions on information, it's not going to happen with one individual. It's going to happen with many different individuals. I mean, think about it. I mean, when you have a business data fabric that brings in all of your external information, your internal information, your customer data, your plant data, your production data, your expense data, you'll be able to ask questions and insights of that data and really play around with it, do different scenarios, but it's not going to happen with one individual. It's going to take many different individuals to really work with all that information and bring that to light. And so again, I think that we've been going back and forth about this on the strategic CFO, the strategic finance individual. That's who's going to succeed. And for those people that can get their heads around being strategic and effective, that's who's going to succeed as FP&A of the future.
I love it, man. Everybody, you heard it here, right? That strategic level CFO, right? That gets outside the finance organization, right? We go get into sales. As I was leading high growth businesses in software and different industries that I led finance organization, my primary business partner was always outside of the finance team. It was always sales and marketing, right? Those were always my fun people to work with. But I think that's what you mentioned is that with all this data across the organization, and now that finance can be the center place to bring all of that intelligence together, to help inform the business to make those strategic real-time decisions, that's the CFO of the future.
Absolutely.
And I know one of the things that a lot of probably people are going to look through this, and it's a challenge, right? On that curve of people being beginners of learning generative AI to advance, you've got a lot of finance professionals. And typically, when you look at the finance space, when it comes to new tech, we're usually the laggers. We're not like the sales and marketing to adopt things the day it comes out, right? So what would be some of your advice for those beginners that are looking to get down and leveraging some of the strategic insight, this communication? What would be some practical insights you would give people to get to learning generative AI and how it can help their value?
So I think small use cases first. Start with many different small use cases, build upon those wins, and use those as successes internally to drive more and more consumption. Obviously, a big bang approach is not going to work. It's just too much, and we're reserved as finance individuals. So you start with the small use cases, maybe sales planning, sales finance. Look at your sales data, bring in more and more of your sales data from across the enterprise, marry it with your CRM information and everything else, and then start generating insights on that. Automate processes as well. And basically with this, show the return on investment that you got, that, hey, these are the insights you were delivering pre-AI models, and now this is what you're delivering now, and use that as a baseline to work across many different more. So, if you start automating marketing finance, then in terms of the campaigns that you're running, automating different processes around that, measuring the impact of these campaigns in a real-time manner as well, and delivering insights that are generated automatically versus in a manual manner. Then you start moving on to maybe operations and other cost areas. And then finally, you've built use cases across finance overall, and it's a win that everybody celebrates and a win that everybody can multiply from.
Yeah, and I love that. It's baby steps, right? Because a lot of what we're talking about right now, to some people, is like, man, that's like an elephant. I don't know how to tackle that. That's way too big. And if I was to give somebody some practical advice, it's actually a use case that I worked on, right? I was working with a FP&A manager, and he's like, hey, Chris, I have a new approach. I want to do a zero-based budgeting as what we're working through, right? But I don't know a lot about it. And I said, hey, here's a great prompt for you, right? You are an FP&A manager at a high-growth SaaS company, and you want to do a zero-based budgeting. Give me the top pros, cons, information that I need to know, everything about zero budgeting, so I can have that conversation with my CEO and make it available that I can copy and paste it in a 5-slide PowerPoint.
Yeah.
And I'm literally working with him, and we're doing that. And he's like, oh my goodness, Chris, like all the research I would have had to do, all the information, and to me, the biggest use case you have is it accelerates you from 0 to 80%. Now he can spend that last 20% really customizing that zero-based budgeting approach that he wants to take, the business partners he wants to talk to. Now he's got a framework right there.
Yeah.
It's a practical use case that exactly what you talked about. Getting all this information together, collaborating and communicating with the C-suite to be able to have a more actionable plan to go execute on.
A perfect return on investment, right?
Perfect, there it is, ROI, man. Who better in finance to love ROI than us? So, hey, I really love this conversation, and I want to have one last question, which is a crystal ball. So we got the crystal ball.
We got it, yeah.
We're looking at generative AI in finance for the next 5 to 15 years. Praz, what does that look like? What does it feel like?
This is bold, but we are no longer Excel jockeys.
Let's go.
We understand the data, we understand the information, and we are the most strategic function in the organization because we know the numbers, we know the data, and we're giving the guidance that's making us move forward. That's it. That's all it is for 5 to 10 years.
Yep. That's it. We were able to move that value up. Praz, thank you so much for your time. Deeply enjoyed this conversation.
Likewise.
Thank you so much for your time.
Great. Thanks very much.